transcendent would be another. The things that we know about without being able to quantify them. Music, love, landscape for a lot of people, I think. Different times of day, some combinations of all those things. The nocturne. I wouldn't trust anyone who was tone deaf on these things. But I think the great intellectual and in some ways cultural task is to satisfy hungers of this kind artistically and aesthetically without them becoming the pretext for superstition or empowering the supernatural or anyone who wants to build power on that. And I don't think it's too much to ask. There are many people, I mean, this building is in a way a testimony to it. It's not a cathedral exactly, but it's where people can come for music and for a sense of there being something higher and finer than the everyday. But it doesn't gratify any cult or any ambition that has supernatural, that exploits the supernatural for what are unfortunately rather crudely material purposes.
Marx thought he had the answer, but your appeal here to higher values and so on is interesting, and the question is whether it really will happen. I mean, and the question is whether we've gone from dialectical materialism to plain old materialism, and whether that's all that's going to be left when you take away or strip away religious thought.
Well, I was asked this question earlier on this visit. I asked it quite a lot. Say, you know, the alternative is the world of McDonald's and condoms and pointless tourism and pleasure-seeking and empty hedonism and so forth. I fail to see the force of this critique in two ways. One is, if you really look at the intestinal life of any religion, you'll find it's extremely earthy and materialistic. Are you going to really tell me that the Catholic Church lives on spirituality? Even just look at the outlines of its prelates. Just look at its finances. Look at it's pretty gross. Look at how the Islamic Republic of Iran actually conducts business. It's a racket. It's a shameful, obvious racket, which includes, by the way, dealing in things and profiting from things like child prostitution and narcotics. Look at how the Taliban finances itself, these so-called ascetics and self-sacrificing suicidal visionaries. It's a crime family is what it is. That's the first thing. I've never met a church that isn't completely in and of the material world and wouldn't yield to that analysis. Second, and I tried a bit of this in my shorter address, if you don't think that contemplating, say, the work of Einstein or Edwin Hubble or Stephen Hawking doesn't have something of the transcendent and the numinous to it, then I feel sorry for you. It's almost, at some points, it's almost ecstatic what they're talking about. The sheer beauty of the natural world, what I call the awe-inspiring character of physics. This is really magnificent. It's marvelous. It deserves almost to be called miraculous. Who here knows what I mean by the event horizon? I couldn't see you if you did, but and by the way, I don't really know either, but here's how Hawking, he's such a brilliant writer about science, is how he describes it. So the event horizon is the lip of the black hole. It's the aperture itself. If you could travel to it in some way, and you could get to the edge of the black hole, get to the little black hole, you'd be at the event horizon. And if you could fall in, be pulled into it, you'd be able to see in some way the past as well as the future. Except, of course, you wouldn't have time. There's always something, but there's contemplate that for a bit. It's not McDonald's. And in fact, one of Hawking's friends says to him that if he himself were ever diagnosed with a terminal illness, and if he could arrange to go of his own volition, that's how he would want to do it. So no, it's the same as the people who say that other forms of totalitarianism not explicitly theocratic, are secular. An argument that keeps on annoying me, and you'll probably want to return to it, but just for now I'd say, well, because I never don't get asked, but I just say, well, I'm on this particular aspect of it. To say, to have this argument fairly, you'd have to point to a society, not that had been Stalinized or Nazified or something of this sort, but that was based on the veneration of, respect for, study of Voltaire, Lucretius, Einstein, Galileo, Spinoza, possibly the greatest ethicist there ever was, Bertrand Russell, Thomas Jefferson, and so on. You'd have to find a society where those were these sort of, if you like, the moral and philosophical authorities, and see how that society had degenerated into slavery, cannibalism, starvation, purges, and witch hunts. And that experiment, alas, we have not yet run. But that's the one I would propose.
It's odd when I think about it. It's really odd, in fact, that I chose to do this as a devil's advocate interview. But let's leave that aside.
No, wait, I'm sorry, I have to now. Yeah. I was asked by...
Oh, no.
It's an anecdote.
Not chapter 10.
No, it's an anecdote. I was asked... Oh, no, not chapter 10 again. Please, sir, not that. In case you don't know and haven't got the damn book yet, and I'm not sure it's not in there yet, but I was asked by the Vatican to testify against the sainthood nomination of Mother Teresa, against initially her beatification. And I said yes, of course. I was very honored to be asked. And yes, Your Holiness, the first time I've ever said that, and the last as well. So I went to testify, and I made a discovery that I thought I'd share with you. Everyone used to think they knew one thing about the Catholic Church, whether they were Catholics or not, that in sainthood arguments they have a devil's advocate, advocatus diaboli. And it was true until very recently. The last pope scrapped this office. The office doesn't exist any longer. It was partly so he could fast-track sainthood. He made more saints, the last pope did, than his 10 predecessors combined in double. So the advocatus diaboli office was shut down, no longer is there. So I had to testify just in a seminar room with a Monsignor and a deacon and a priest and a tape recorder and a Bible. And I realized halfway through that I'd just become the first person in history to have represented the devil pro bono.
Okay.
Which is a distinction of a sort.
You took us into the realms of cosmology a short time ago. Here's another quote from your book. Religion has run out of justifications thanks to the telescope and the microscope. I mean, you're simply arguing that...
It's a bit simplistic, that, isn't it?
Yes, it is a bit. But you are simply arguing that science has killed off religion, is that right?
I'm saying I think it's incompatible with. It's the two ways of thinking as well as the two modes of discovery that follow are incompatible with it, irreconcilable. Yes, I do think so. But it's a bit crude to say that the microscope and the telescope alone will do it. I was thinking more about what we found out about our own human nature, namely the microscope. We know a lot more about what makes us morally and ethically the way we are, and what our kinship is with the lower animals as well. From the telescope, we know more about the origins of our cosmos. It's a shorthand for what I was trying to enlarge upon this evening.
Yep. The
problem
is,
might have to revisit that.
The problem is there are going to remain fundamental questions which science almost certainly will never answer. For example, if the origin of the universe was the Big Bang, what caused that to happen? How could the entire universe simply pop into existence magically for no reason at all? I mean, because science won't be able to answer those questions, religion will always seek to.
Well, I think it's the other way around, actually. I mean, the reason why religion is such a great argument to be having is that it is our first attempt at making sense. I mean, religion is what you get before philosophy. It's our first attempt at philosophy. Most philosophers started off as religious, as did many ethicists. It's our first attempt at cosmology, first attempt at healthcare, by means of miracle, alas, but still. And prayer. It's our first attempt to make sense. And science doesn't completely replace all those questions, but it says that there's no need for a supernatural attempt to answer them. In other words, if you say because we don't know what the scientific origins of the Big Bang are, which Father Lemaitre didn't know any more than I do, or Einstein did. There must be a supernatural explanation. That isn't logical at all. And if there was a supernatural progenitor, where did that supernatural progenitor come from? Who created that? So you get nothing out of it but an infinite regression, and I think the meanest application to science is more satisfying than that, and much more likely to yield an answer that you can at least argue about. Whereas if you're simply told you have a creator and he has a plan for you, it explains nothing, and it has reactionary implications, because it suggests there are people who can't just tell you what to do,